the moment Rachel walked out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent stood frozen in the dimly lit apartment, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. The finality in her voice still rang in his ears. I just don't love you anymore. 3 years. Countless late-night conversations. Whispered promises under tangled sheets. Dreams of forever. All of it obliterated in an instant. His throat felt dry, his pulse erratic, but the emotion that should have come, anger, grief, anything, remained suffocated beneath the weight of pure, numbing emptiness. His feet moved on autopilot toward the kitchen, fingers fumbling for the cold comfort of a beer bottle. The hiss of the cap twisting off filled the quiet, and he took a long, burning gulp, as if alcohol could wash away the aftertaste of heartbreak. But nothing dulled the ache in his ribs, the ghost of Rachel's touch still lingering in the fabric of his shirt. The apartment felt too big, too lifeless without her laughter to fill it. For the first time in years, Vincent felt truly alone, until, moments later, a soft knock at the door shattered the silence. Vincent hesitated at the sound of the knock, fingers tightening around the cold glass of his beer bottle. For a fleeting second, his heart lurched. Was it Rachel? Had she changed her mind? But no, she was gone, and she wasn't coming back. With a tired exhale, he trudged toward the door, barely bothering to check who it was before pulling it open. Daniel stood there, leaning casually against the doorframe, his dark eyes scanning Vincent with an unreadable expression. He was still dressed from the day, fitted jeans, a plain black t-shirt that stretched across his lean frame, a gray hoodie unzipped just enough to reveal a sliver of skin at his collarbone. Unlike Vincent, who was unraveling at the seams, Daniel looked effortless, composed. Heard some noise, Daniel said, tilting his head slightly. Thought I'd check in. Vincent let out a bitter chuckle. So, the whole building knows I got dumped, huh? Daniel shrugged. Thin walls, but there was no amusement in his voice. Only something quieter, something dangerously close to concern. Vincent sighed, stepping back. Beer's in the fridge. Daniel gave a small nod and stepped inside, moving with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. Vincent should have questioned why that felt so reassuring. Why? As Daniel grabbed 2 bottles and dropped onto the couch beside him. The crushing weight in his chest seemed just a little lighter. But tonight, he didn't have the energy to overthink. The quiet between them wasn't awkward, it was settling, grounding, like the weight of Daniel's presence alone was enough to anchor Vincent to something real. They sat side by side, the low hum of the television filling the silence, the flickering screen casting shadows across Daniel's sharp jawline. Vincent took a slow sip of his beer, forcing himself to focus on anything but the way Daniel's thigh pressed lightly against his own. You don't have to talk about it, Daniel said, his voice low. Easy, but if you do, I'm here. Vincent exhaled sharply, staring at the amber liquid in his bottle. Nothing to talk about. She left. That's it. The words felt hollow, like an echo of something too painful to say out loud. Daniel didn't push, he just leaned back into the couch, fingers idly tracing the label on his beer. There was something about the way he sat, completely at ease, completely present, that made Vincent's chest tighten. You know, Daniel murmured after a while, breakups suck, but they're never just about the person who left. Sometimes, they force you to see things about yourself you weren't ready to face. Vincent's fingers tightened around his bottle. He wasn't sure why that hit so deep, but it did. He finally turned, meeting Daniel's gaze for the first time that night. And for the briefest moment, something electric hummed in the air between them, unspoken, uncertain, but impossible to ignore. The air between them had changed. Subtle, but undeniable. Vincent could feel it in the way Daniel's gaze lingered just a little too long. In the quiet expectation humming beneath his casual posture. It was an unspoken challenge, one Vincent didn't know how to face. Didn't know if he wanted to. You're staring, Daniel murmured, the ghost of a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Vincent's stomach twisted, heat creeping up his neck. He looked away quickly, clearing his throat as if that could somehow erase the moment. Wasn't staring, he muttered, taking another sip of his beer. Daniel let out a low chuckle, setting his bottle down on the coffee table before stretching his arms behind his head. The shift in his posture, the way his shirt lifted just slightly, exposing the toned ridges of his stomach, it was deliberate, teasing. Vincent swallowed hard, forcing his gaze away, but the damage was already done. He had noticed, and worse, Daniel had noticed him noticing. "Relax, Vincent," Daniel murmured, voice lower now, more knowing. "You look like you're about to jump out of your skin." Vincent clenched his jaw. I don't know what this is." Daniel studied him, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes before he leaned in, slow, deliberate, close enough that Vincent could feel the warmth of his breath. "Then maybe," Daniel whispered, "you should stop thinking so much." And for a moment, Vincent almost did. Vincent had spent his entire life convinced he knew exactly who he was. Until now. Until Daniel. Until the way his presence unsettled something deep inside him. Something Vincent didn't know how to name. He had been fine, or at least functioning, until that night on the couch when Daniel had leaned in just a fraction too close. His voice a shade too smooth. His body a little too relaxed. As if he already knew what Vincent hadn't yet admitted to himself. And now? Now Vincent couldn't stop thinking about it. The tension followed him through the next few days, seeping into every quiet moment. The way Daniel's voice played in his head when he was alone. The memory of the way his shirt had lifted, exposing just enough skin to send a sharp, unfamiliar heat through Vincent's body. The ghost of his breath on Vincent's jaw, like a promise left unfinished. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. But when Vincent dreamed, his mind betrayed him, fingertips skimming his skin, lips at his throat, strong hands gripping his waist, his body responding in ways that shook him awake in the middle of the night. Breathless, aching, needing. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just loneliness. And it terrified him. Because the next time he saw Daniel, standing in the hallway, leaning against his doorframe with that same unreadable smirk, Vincent's stomach flipped. His body reacting before his mind could catch up. This wasn't nothing, not anymore. Vincent stood outside Daniel's door, his pulse hammering like a war drum beneath his skin. He hadn't meant to come here, not really. His feet had moved on their own, pulled by some invisible force, some undeniable gravity that he no longer had the strength to resist. Before he could talk himself out of it, the door swung open. Daniel stood there, barefoot, hair slightly tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, his sweatpants hanging low on his hips. His dark eyes swept over Vincent, assessing, amused, but beneath that, expectant. Couldn't stay away, huh? Daniel's voice was quiet, teasing, but there was something heavier beneath it. Vincent exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Daniel studied him for a beat, then stepped back, wordlessly inviting him in. Vincent hesitated, but only for a second. The apartment was dimly lit, warm, smelling faintly of coffee and something Vincent couldn't quite place. He swallowed hard, rubbing the back of his neck. His body was tense, his thoughts tangled, but Daniel was steady, like an anchor in a storm. You don't have to know, Daniel murmured, closing the space between them inch by inch. You just have to stop running. Vincent didn't move, didn't breathe. He felt the heat radiating from Daniel's skin, the charged air between them crackling like a live wire. And then, before he could think, before he could stop himself, he leaned in. The kiss was hesitant at first, like testing the edge of something sharp, uncertain but electric. The moment Vincent's lips brushed against Daniel's, a shudder rolled through him, a wildfire sparked from a single match. He should have pulled away. He should have questioned it. But then Daniel's hands were on him, firm but patient, fingers pressing lightly into his waist as if grounding him, as if saying stay. Vincent did. A quiet, knowing hum vibrated against his lips as Daniel deepened the kiss, his mouth warm, teasing, coaxing Vincent past the hesitation. He moved with an ease that sent a rush of heat straight through Vincent's spine. His body reacting before his mind could catch up. He felt Daniel's fingers slide up beneath his shirt, grazing over his ribs, his stomach tightening at the contact. Relax, Daniel murmured, his voice low, his breath hot against Vincent's jaw. But Vincent couldn't relax, not when every touch sent a pulse of something raw and unfamiliar through him. Something that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with need. And then Daniel pushed, just slightly, until Vincent's back met the wall. His lips traced a slow path from his jaw to the hollow of his throat. His fingers tightening at Vincent's hips. Vincent's breath hitched. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was feeling everything, all at once. And God help him, he wanted more. The night unraveled in slow, feverish touches, each one stripping Vincent of the walls he had so carefully built. He had never felt like this before, like he was coming undone. Piece by piece, under Daniel's hands, under his mouth, his skin burned where Daniel touched him, every inch of him responding in ways that sent shivers down his spine. Daniel moved with confidence but not force, reading Vincent's hesitations like a language only he understood. His lips brushed against Vincent's collarbone, slow and deliberate, his fingers trailing lower, leaving a path of fire in their wake. "You don't have to hold back," Daniel murmured against his skin, his voice low, coaxing. Vincent's breath shuddered, his fingers gripping Daniel's shoulders, his body torn between tension and surrender. This was new, this was terrifying, but God, it felt so damn right. Then Daniel's hands slid under his shirt, lifting it over his head in one smooth motion. Their chests pressed together, heat rolling between them, and Vincent let out a sound he didn't recognize, half a gasp, half a moan. Daniel smiled against his throat. That's it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Vincent knew he should stop. That tomorrow would come with a million questions. But right now? Right now, he didn't want answers. He just wanted Daniel. And as Daniel pulled him toward the bedroom, Vincent let go of everything else. The morning arrived too soon. Sunlight slipping through the curtains, casting lazy golden streaks across tangled sheets and bare skin. Vincent stirred, the warmth beside him anchoring him before his mind even caught up with reality. Daniel, his scent lingered in the space between them, something warm, familiar, intoxicating. For a moment, Vincent just lay there, his fingers ghosting over the edge of the pillow, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of Daniel's breathing. It should have felt foreign, waking up like this, but it didn't. It felt like something he wasn't ready to name, something dangerous but right. Then reality struck. What the hell had he done? His pulse quickened, panic clawing at his throat. This wasn't him. He didn't do things like this. Didn't let himself fall into something so reckless, so consuming. He needed to go. Needed to leave before this became something real. But before he could move, Daniel shifted, eyes still heavy with sleep, and murmured, "You don't have to run." Vincent froze, because for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to.